Hello, everyone. I'm Erol Senel, and welcome to a special episode of Success Shorts, which by all means is not going to be all that short. Today, I'm joined by my really good friend, Walter Randall, who is the owner of Lounge Studios, which is located in Midtown Manhattan. He's got a hell of a story of overcoming adversity, perseverance, and having really strong faith. But Walter and I decided that instead of talking about his story today, that we're going to have a really real conversation about what's going on in America around Black Lives Matter, police, and injustices. So we feel like that should come first. So Walter, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Definitely.
I've been looking forward to this for some time.
Awesome. Me too, man. It's going to be a good conversation. So, I mean, with that in mind, we've had some really robust conversations through the years, and we've talked about doing something around this for a while, because this is obviously isn't the first time that race and racism has come up. But what do you think it is that makes our conversations so impactful and personal and respectful?
I feel like a lot of it has to do with you being able to listen to ideas that don't necessarily at the time fit what your ideology is, and be able to take it in and reflect on it, and you're open. And I feel like I try to be as open as you are. And I think when you have two people who are not so stuck into what they feel is the correct thing, that they have the ability to critique themselves and say, oh, maybe he has a valid point there, and then be able to go back and reflect on it. And then usually the next time we talk, we, have expanded opinions based on our conversation.
Yeah. And I think that's definitely true. I don't think either of us are necessarily dogmatic in the way we approach things. We don't just follow things to follow it. We're both very introspective. And, we had a conversation around this, just about a week ago. And I would say, some of my thoughts have evolved since then, because I wanted to be on point. I want to know things that relate to you and relate to everyone that is involved in this, but especially all the people that we know and that we've grown up with. So I've done a lot of educating on myself around this over the past week, which has been rewarding. And I'll tell you, at times it's confusing, and it's also a bit intimidating now heading into this with so many different thoughts just kind of floating around my head. So this should be fun. But I mean, just to kind of kick things off, and I have my perspective, but you obviously have a very different one. So when you think about everything that's going on, just to kind of level set, what does Black Lives Matter mean to you as a Black man?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory when I look at it. It seems very simple to me. It's hard to believe that it gets so convoluted, it gets so misunderstood by anybody, because it's Black Lives Matter. My life matters. My family's life matters. My kid, her life matters. And I think that's what the main issue is that in this society for so long, Black lives have meant less than what other people's lives have meant. And it's stating really a human right, obvious thing, that our life matters just as much as a white person's life. And I think it's a pretty simple message. I could try to expand on it, but I don't think I could even go any further.
No, I don't. And quite honestly, I think at its core, that's what the message is. And I think that's something, when we spoke last time, and as we're going to speak here, I think that's something that we need to continuously come back to. Because, there's a lot of noise that surrounds the movement at this point. Initially it was pretty damn clear, like George Floyd's life did not matter in that moment, and that sprung up the outcry around it. And you think about all the other instances, it goes back to the same thing. However, ever since that initial moment of, visceral shock and appall, and just like that appalling feeling that everyone had, there's been so many other things that have happened since then that are now associated with the phrase Black Lives Matter. You have, you have the part of Seattle that shut down, which has something to do with it, but it also kind of doesn't. So what I'm saying, the reason why I'm saying that is, like, as we're discussing this, I think if we can continue to just bring the thoughts back to just this simple human act of kindness that is realizing, yes, Black lives do matter. So when you think about what was going on with George Floyd,
yeah,
what was your reaction to that? I think we've all had like really strong reactions, and I haven't come across anyone who can justify what most of these police officers have done in these videos.
mm-hmm.
So I don't necessarily think that's it, but what
well, that's fortunate for you.
Well, here's the thing.
I feel like if you go online, I'm sure, there's plenty of people who don't see what's wrong with it. To the point, the police didn't see anything wrong with it because they all gathered at the killer's house, right? In support of him, the police force. I'm not sure if you knew that, but yeah, they all, hundreds of them went to his house in support after he killed George Floyd.
So this was in Minnesota?
Yes. The police department came to his house to support him. So yeah, it's fortunate that you really haven't heard anybody say, oh, I don't see anything wrong with it, but it's clear there's a large number of people in society that don't see anything wrong with it. And a lot of them are in positions of power and authority with the ability to enact those beliefs on minorities.
Okay. So this is an interesting point. So we're all kind of existing in our echo chambers, right? I try my best to cross over into as many as I can to see what's going on in different things. And I mean, with all the things that are out there, I missed that one, which is really disheartening. I mean,
yes,
I don't know what their motivation was behind it. I'm not going to try to read into that. However, it's pretty damn insensitive.
Yeah,
to say the least.
To say the least. You have it again with this recent killing of Brooks in Atlanta. They have this, what is it? They're calling it the blue flu, where these officers are calling in sick ever since he was the officer who murdered him was charged. Mm-hmm. Again, a sign of support.
So here's a question for you, and I don't know if we can actually answer it. However, when you think about what's happening now when it comes to police officers that are calling in sick, because I'll tell you one thing, I would not want to be a cop right now, because even if you are the best person out there, for one, if you're out there and you're trying to deal with these situations, no one knows who you are. And two, you don't have the support of local leadership anymore, because a lot of people are very scared to kind of step up and be like, hey, you know what? Some of these police officers are phenomenal, and you shouldn't be throwing bricks at them. You shouldn't be throwing balloons with piss at them and stuff like that. So is it so much that they're, in this case in Atlanta, do you think that they're more scared for being out there themselves, or do you think it's more of a statement against the mayor and the district attorney?
Well, okay, I'll answer that, but then I want to get back to something you said. So, I mean, to me, it's pretty clear that it's a statement, period, that they don't feel like they're responsible, that they don't feel that there is this systematic racism. They don't feel like they should be held accountable. So once one of theirs is held accountable, for instance, in Minneapolis or in Atlanta, once one of them is held accountable, you have this outcry or this protest, showing up at their house in support, calling off in support. The older gentleman in Buffalo, 75, who got pushed to the ground and was bleeding from his ear. When they went to the courthouse, they all showed up to support him and clapped when he came out of the courthouse, the officer who did that, after charges were filed. So they're making it very clear. It's not like I have to really search for it. It's really clear, like, oh, they're doing this because they don't feel like they should be held accountable for their actions. But to something else you said that, is it local leadership, or is it the lack of support from local leadership, saying that there are so many of these good cops out there? Define good cop, because that's what I hear a lot, like a few bad apples. Majority of these cops are great cops, but it depends on what you define a great cop as. And don't forget, when you say a few bad apples, the rest of it is that, a few bad apples spoil the barrel.
Sure.
So if they're in there and nobody's been taking them out for years, I mean, I'm pretty sure by now the barrel is spoiled. And so let me just get into that because, for me to say, oh, I don't think there are as many good cops as so many people say might be controversial. But let me give you an example. Would you say that the cops who were there when George Floyd was murdered and the one that didn't kneel on him, the one that was just standing on the side, but didn't try to stop it, do you feel that he's a good cop?
Me personally? No, I do not.
Yes. Okay. Do you feel that a cop who knows that these things are happening in their precincts or in their policing community, but they don't speak out about it, about the murder of innocent African Americans, do you feel like those cops are good cops?
No, I do not.
You don't. So now, how many cops, because I'm sure you know police, how many cops do you know that have publicly spoken out about the injustices and the murders that you know personally, that are on Facebook, people that we went to high school with, people we went to college with, that are police officers, that as these things happen throughout time, and not just when they're national news, but as they happen throughout their life, are they posting things to their Facebook, speaking out, saying that there's something wrong with the system? Do you know a lot of cops that are doing that?
So I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And we can go down, if you want to continue down that train of thought in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
So from a police officer standpoint, I don't know the communications regulations within the force. There's a communications officer that deals with the media and all this. However, during this time, I'm very supportive. I know what you have gone through. I know what other people have gone through, and I want to support that. However, when you do that, you get feedback. Yes. And the feedback I've gotten has been, through dialogue, through direct messages with, some police officers that I went to college with. No one from high school. But honestly, I don't know if I know anyone who's a police officer that we went to high school with. However, they're hurting too. So
they're hurting how?
So
expand on that.
Okay. So the experience that I'm hearing from them is they have to be out there. They have to go into these situations where you're surrounded. This was early on in the when
George Floyd.
Like right after the initial George Floyd into the rioting component of George Floyd, there was like that few days, which was really aggressive. Where the tensions on both sides were super high, and going into that, like they were just questioning, kind of, why am I even doing this? I can't do what I need to do. I'm being treated like scum. I've never done any of this stuff, type of thing. And also, I feel like they are, and this is where I think we need to expand on the conversation. They are in a system where there's only so much they can do within it, which is a big issue.
Okay, so right there, before we even go any further, still, the answer is no. I just want to make sure to my question. You don't know a lot of people who have spoken out publicly who are police when Black people are murdered.
Directly, no.
Innocent Black people. So back to my point. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so the police chiefs that you see on social media and whatnot, they're able to have a voice. I don't know if it would end these people's career if they did. I don't know.
Do you think it's worth it to end your career if you know somebody is unjustly being murdered in front of you, or you know of it? Do you feel like that's something, an obligation for somebody who's taken an oath to serve and protect, that it should maybe be high up on their priority list to maybe speak out and serve and protect if somebody is innocently being murdered?
Yeah, I think, if you see that and you experience it, you do it in a heartbeat.
Right? If you know about it, right?
But if you,
no matter what you
but
are.
if you, right, but if you don't know about it.
If you're a traffic cop, or if you're a school teacher, and one of your other fellow teachers is molesting a child, is it your obligation to speak out and make it known?
Yeah.
So are we holding teachers to a higher standard than we are police officers who carry guns and who are supposed to or sworn to protect and serve us?
I think in some departments, yes, some departments, no. I don't necessarily think it's a blanket statement.
What's not a blanket statement?
Where I think that there are departments where officers are welcome to share that information.
Yes. But regardless if you're welcome to, I'm saying, do you have an obligation? You personally, do you feel like you have an obligation to speak out? If you're a teacher and you witness something horrific, or if you're a police officer,
100%.
You would. So back to what I was saying about this statement about all these great cops and good cops. Mm-hmm. By your own admission, you feel like if somebody is murdering somebody who is innocent, if you know that there are injustices, then you should speak out. So I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you said, of course. I mean, this is something that's a natural response to a good person, to a good officer who has been sworn in to serve and protect you, that they would speak out of all things of murder, right? So again, it's hard for me to say, oh, all of these good cops, because that's a blanket statement to me, because I would love to see what would make me feel better as a Black person is the moment that video came out, universally across the board, you see police posting and speaking out to the media, and they want to go support the killer. I wish they would have came and supported the family of the guy who was murdered, right? That's what a good person does. That's what a good cop does. So we have, I think, we are weighing good cop differently. I'm weighing it in a way that I want my good cop to value human life. I don't want him to value his connection to his team or his comrades more than he values my life. And that is where the difference is coming in, because if you can't speak out to something as vile as what we saw, somebody kneeling on somebody's neck and murdering somebody, then how good of a cop are you?
So I want to peel this back, okay?
Please.
So whether you speak out or not, I don't think that necessarily is a definition. If you are in that department and you know that something happened that is batshit crazy, where someone kills someone unjustly, it's your duty. That's your community. You need to speak up and you need to right that wrong. That's what you signed up for.
Agreed.
However, you throw someone else who's a police officer, say,
in New York,
in New York, say, Milford, New Hampshire. That's where I am. Okay.
Gotcha.
Who has a family, who has all this.
Yes. And
them simply posting something to support can mean that they lose their job and their ability to do it, knowing that if it were to happen in Milford, New Hampshire, in a heartbeat, they would report it.
If I'm killed tomorrow here, would you not be sad? Would you not, even though you're in Wilford? What I'm saying is that there's this really big disconnect here. Okay. Is that borders are something that we made up. It's not a real thing. I can drive to you. There's no wall separating us. There's no wall that separates the emotions from me being in New York and you being there.
Of course.
If somebody in New Hampshire does something horrific and I see it, I'm going to speak up. Those are my morals, right? I'm sure me knowing you that you would too if something happened. So what I'm saying is this. People, you're right. They are prioritizing their own work situations, their own work relationships with their bosses. But what I'm saying is that really the right thing to do when it comes to human life. We're not talking about somebody saying, we're going to boycott Taco Bell because they did this, or we're going to boycott Starbucks and the police comes out. I'm talking about somebody kneeling on somebody's neck and the person is screaming and crying out for their mother who has been deceased. The most sickening of things. And these are people that you share a camaraderie with beyond state lines. We all know police officers share a camaraderie. And to see one of your comrades do something as vile and disgusting as that, yeah, you're right. They put their family, their comfortability a little bit higher than that life that was taken because they don't want to get uncomfortable. They don't want to be in a weird situation at work. They don't want to be second guessed if they're really down for the police department. But to me, and I think to a good cop, that wouldn't matter when it comes to a human life.
But don't you think that there's the opportunity to do something about this in a more responsible way on the local level?
But that's the thing. Everybody keeps saying, but I didn't do it, but it can be done a little bit different. And let me go back to why we had such a great conversation the other day. When we got on the phone, you said you wish that Black Lives Matter movement would go about it a little different, right? Because you felt like there was a way that we could make people understand a little bit better. And if we could just make people understand a little bit better, then maybe we can convince them that Black lives do matter, right? And in that conversation, when I heard you say that, at first it took me back a little bit, but because I know it's you, and I know that you always are sharing your thoughts honestly, I was like, oh, let me take this moment to let them know, like, the Black Lives Matter movement is not a movement to convince or change anybody's minds, right? It's a movement to change things. And we talked about this. We talked about if your child's life was on the line, would you wait to try to convince somebody, or would you just go save your child's life? And it was pretty evident. If your child's life was on the line, you wouldn't, oh, well, just give me a few days or a few weeks or a few years to convince this person not to hurt my child. I'm going to try to convince them. And even if, let's say we did try to convince them, we're trying to convince people who are racist. We're trying to convince police officers who are supporting another officer for kneeling on their neck and murdering him. That's whose minds we're trying to change. We're trying to change these minds for over 400 years. So it's not our responsibility to convince people that our lives matter. We know that our lives matter. It's our responsibility to change things for our children. It's our responsibility to make sure that my daughter's life is never in danger from a rogue officer, and not a rogue officer, from an officer. My daughter doesn't have to participate in these protests when she's older and risk her life. We're just trying to change things. We really don't care about what you want us to do or whose opinions we should change. It's when we have momentum, we have to try to make that momentum work for us, right? And we talked about, you wish that they were peaceful, right? You said, I think you were saying you wish that they were peaceful. You can't really support the rioting, right? Or something.
There was a component of that. I understood
of
the
rioting. Yeah.
Like I don't.
Yeah, got you. So
like
you understood it, but most people, they don't understand it. And we talked about the Martin Luther King quote, right?
Yep.
Rioting is the voice for people who are unheard, right? We talked about that, but we also talked about, when we were talking about this, because you were saying there may be a better way to change people's minds, I asked you, did you ever remember a civil rights moment or a moment of change in the history of this country for Black people that did not involve violence?
Right.
Name one major moment of change, significant change for Black people in this country that did not involve horrible violence, not just a small amount, a large amount.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the Civil War. 600,000, mostly white men, had to die in order for Black people not to be owned by white people.
Yeah.
And it's how crazy does that sound? You're willing to send your sons away to die so you can continue to own me and my people. 600,000 people died just so you can continue to own me, right? So that wasn't a peaceful change at all. The first Civil Rights Act that happened was because of a church bombing in Birmingham. A church bombing. Nothing peaceful about that. The Voting Rights Act, huge piece of change, right? Happened after Bloody Sunday, when police beat us to a bloody pulp as we marched in Selma, right? The next Civil Rights Act of 1968 and the Fair Housing Act happened after the assassination of Martin Luther King. And we rioted for over 2 weeks in over 100 cities in the country. And they passed those bills within 10 days. So the premise of, can we just wait to figure out a different way to make people understand, it's not supported by anything. People say, oh, peaceful protesting. They say, oh, peaceful protest. That's changed things. But I just named all the major changes. And when people say peaceful protest, they're talking about MLK. Have you seen MLK protests? Do you see what's happening to the people in the protest? They're getting beat, chewed up by dogs. Yeah. But it's funny that white people think that those are peaceful protests, right? But when we protest and we break a window for Walgreens, that's violent. When we break a window in Macy's and steal some clothes out, oh, those violent rioting protesters. But when we march peacefully with MLK that they killed, those were peaceful, but we were getting killed. Because in America, our lives have always meant less than the value of things. A store window today causes more outrage among certain segments of the white community than a black man getting killed by a police officer with a knee on his neck. Mm-hmm. So that becomes the violent protest, not the dogs chewing on people. So there was never, in my mind, a peaceful protest that I've ever witnessed.
Right, and I agree. And so this isn't necessarily a point that I think that we were that far off on.
Oh no.
I think this was one of those areas where it's, because to me, you have this viewpoint where it's the you don't care about the 30%. It's like 70-30 or 60-40, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But to me, it's far greater than that. And everyone, I feel at this point, because when you look at where we've come societally, like mm-hmm. when it comes to women's rights, gay rights, now we have this going on right now. I feel like there's a progressive wave that has shifted over the past maybe 10 years. That is more welcoming to social change. So
agreed.
I think that there's more people behind this than you might think. And when you look at all those things, like I was just thinking about this, and this isn't even just when it comes to civil rights. Mm-hmm. So Black civil rights, mm-hmm. Because when you look at like the women's issues that they've come, it was only when hostile is not the right word, when they got aggressive, that things actually changed. How long have women been they've been treated like dirt too? Like guys are pigs. And throughout history, we treated women as possessions.
Yes, correct.
And it wasn't until women got really pissed off and started taking people to task. And if it wasn't for social media, I don't think it would have happened as quickly as it did. But it's just mm-hmm. so easy to get that information out there and be like, hey, this motherfucker did this. This person did this. This person did this. Now we're holding the police officers to task in the same way. And I think that's where the effectiveness of this mm-hmm. is working, because we have those visual proof that, this isn't just some kind of story that's off to the side that we can't see. Oh, I read in a newspaper that this happened. No, mm-hmm. we got it on tape. We got another one on tape this week. We got another one on tape this week.
Yeah, for years now, it's been on tape.
so it's accumulating to the point. I think that the noise, and I've come up across many people who have had that mindset. Well, I don't support the rioting. Well, if the rioting's not happening, it's going to be super easy to overlook this. Mm-hmm. The rioting is the thing that's making you scared, and when you're scared, that's when change happens. So I'm cool with that component of it. My issue mm-hmm. with some of this is the other interests that are piggybacking off of this. Mm-hmm. I do have a problem with that, because I think the movement of your definition of what you're saying here, the empathy for you and your wife and your daughter and anyone with kids or anyone who loves anyone, so that's pretty much everybody, The fact that they might lose that person, that's a scary proposition that you shouldn't have to think about in this world, especially at the hands of police. Yeah. To protect and serve. It's not selective protect and serve. It's, okay, you need to do better. So what I'd like to do at some point is kind of go down the policing component just a little bit.
Okay, before you do that, can I address one thing you said?
I was going to ask you if you wanted to address anything, so go ahead.
Yeah, you made a very valid point, because you used the word wave when you were talking about, we have this wave of support now, right? Progressive. You were saying that you feel like, oh, maybe the numbers are more than 70-30, right? But you used the word wave. And that's how I look at the support for Black people in this country. It's a wave. We have it sometimes, and then sometimes we don't. Sometimes white people stand with us, and sometimes they're pretty fair weather friends. So when I talk about taking advantage now and taking what we need now, is because I don't know if those same progressive whites that are marching with us are going to be marching with us 3 months from now, right? Mm-hmm. Some of them will be, because there are white people who are just as dedicated to this thing. But the huge swell that we've seen, I'm not sure, because you used the right word. It does come in waves. The women's rights movements and equality for women have come in waves. So for me, the women's rights thing is super important. But again, we're talking about the murder of innocent people. So I want to make sure that stands like above everything. We're not talking about, of course, we have the same problems that women face. African Americans and African American women are paid less than everybody, but African Americans are paid less than white people. So yeah, I understand all of those components, but when we're talking about the Black Lives Matter, it goes beyond an economical thing. It goes to our life, literally. Stop taking it. Stop taking it for granted when it is taken. Stop trying to control how we deal with when our lives are taken. You see, if you lost, God forbid, you lost a family member, and I came into your house and you were mad and you were maybe, sulking in the corner or doing whatever, and I came over to you and said, stop sulking, that's not the way to grieve. Stop crying, that's not how a man grieves. You would probably either punch me in my face or at the very least look at me like I was crazy, because how can I control how you grieve when you've lost somebody that you care about, right? And that's what this whole thing, it like you said, there's all these mixed messages. It's a very simple message. These mixed messages come from people who do not want to address the fact that Black lives matter. And it's as simple as that. Now, you can get lost in an echo chamber. You can hear misleading information. But when we spoke the last time, we were talking about defund the police, right? We were talking about the defund the police movement. And I said, because you wanted to know a little bit more about it, and you said you had been hearing some really, some crazy things about it. And I told you the first time I heard the term defund the police, it sort of said, I was like, what? Defund the police? Like, to me, I thought like, oh, does that mean like there's no police force anymore? Do we take all the money from them? But I told you what I did. When I heard it and it sort of took me aback a little bit, I Googled it. And then it became clear, like, oh, this is something that police have been supporting. I've heard police officers with their own mouths talk about the very issues that defund the police movement address. But you have to care enough. You have to care enough, like you did, to ask me. You cared enough to actually see what it meant. I cared enough to actually go and Google it and see. A lot of people don't care enough. And it all goes back to that thing. The issue is not big enough. Like you said with the police officer, he has a family. He has a job. He has comrades. He doesn't want to, make that inconvenient, uncomfortable situation. You don't want to make that situation uncomfortable, right? Because it's not that important to him. It's not white lives that are getting taken by Black officers. So of course it's not that big a deal.
Just thinking for a second.
That's fine. I mean, that's you put a lot of, when we talked the last time, a lot of things that you said made me think, like, we had such a good conversation because you hear some of the things that I don't get to hear, right? And you bring them to me, and I can sort of look at them and say, oh, wow, I had never heard that before, but let me look into that, you know.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not by any stretch condoning anyone not speaking out or anything like that.
Don't say but after what you're about to say.
However.
Don't say however.
That was a joke. I'm trying to put myself in that situation. Okay.
We did. Remember, we said you were a teacher, and we said there was a child getting molested. Right. If he was in another state or if he was in another county, you said you would speak up. Right?
But what I'm doing here is I'm trying to relate to an event that takes. So I know we're talking about different areas, and there's no borders.
Yes.
An event that is getting a lot of attention.
Yes.
A lot of people are speaking up in over here.
Yes.
You are trying to do your job to the best of your ability over here.
Correct.
And you think that this guy is a certifiable, like, psychopath.
Yeah.
All right. However, your police chief or whomever says, don't you dare speak up over here. Or
are you putting that in the police chief's mouth?
I'm not. So I'm just saying, because I don't know what that culture is like. Like, all I know is
the culture doesn't matter. This is what I'm telling you.
But the thing is, the culture does matter, though.
No, let me tell you something that's probably you're going to look at me crazy for, and you might remember this. And forgive me because I'm about to say something. I did bad in high school, but our senior year, we were state champs in football. Right? I was a team captain. You were part of that state championship team for the Bengals, right? But one morning at school, you know how everybody used to congregate in the cafeteria before school started? And we would be in there joking around, playing with each other, punching each other, just, having fun. And one time, do you remember Reuben Cockrell?
Yeah.
Okay, Reuben Cockrell.
Dr. Reuben Cockrell.
Oh, doctor, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Dr. Reuben Cockrell. Excuse me. Excuse me, Reuben.
Go
and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but this is bad on me. So I feel comfortable saying it because it's something that, it's something bad that I did. We were all in there joking around, and I was playing with them, and I put like a sleeper hold on them. And I didn't even know the sleeper hold really worked, to be honest with you. I had seen it on like WWF. I'm 17 at the time, and I didn't even put it hard. I was just holding it on them, and we're all over there laughing. But then somebody realized his eyes were turning red, like his probably because of the vein was being cut off, and it was like, oh shit, like he can't. I don't think he could breathe, and I let go, and he was like woozy, and I realized at that moment, like, oh shit, like did I almost kill him? Not even a bad intention, me playing too much for sure, right? And remember, this is in the middle of a championship run for our football team, and I'm one of the team captains. You would say that we had a pretty good camaraderie on that team the year we won state.
Yeah.
You know who Cheatwood is, Tim Cheatwood, star wide receiver at the time. He confronted me in front of everybody and was literally about to punch me, literally was about to fight me because what I did was unacceptable. All of the camaraderie about our state championship run that we eventually ran, all of that went out the window when I did something bad. He stood up to me in that moment and was literally about to fight me. I was so embarrassed. I almost wish that he would have punched me because what I did was wrong. But all of the camaraderie we had, love for each other, 4 years of building this trust to win the state championship, went out the window when I did something that crossed the line to him. And it was immediate. That was character that he showed. I don't care if you're the team captain. I'm going to call you out on this thing right now. And, it was a horrible, I was embarrassed to go to practice, to be honest with you. And I saw Reuben later on, and I tried to get him, oh, can you just punch me in my face or something just so I feel better about myself, just because that's how bad I felt. But you know what the teammates didn't do? They didn't all rally around me and say, oh, it's okay, Walt. You're the team captain. We're doing this football thing. Don't worry about that. That's not a big deal. They didn't all show up at my house and say, we support you for what you did. There's no accountability for what you did. What you did may have been a little weird, but it wasn't a bad thing. Nobody did that. the people on the football team that saw that held me to account. And we had the deepest of camaraderies, and you know that. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying is all of this, but the camaraderie here, it's just your level of comfortability. People complain about, for instance, I had a friend on social media, and we talked about this. After George Floyd was murdered, the first post he posted was about, the post read something like, oh, can you believe that the grocery store and Walmart are closing at 8 because of all the rioting? And KFC is actually closing at 7. And, what the police did, that was bad, but, just as bad as these protesters and people rioting. Imagine this black man's life and people marching for it and breaking some windows being compared to somebody's life being taken. Like, the first post that he posted was about KFC closing early and Walmart closing early. These are the people that we have to try to convince that our life matters. And I told you, this guy was a great guy. He was an amazing guy. I told you, I think if I went to his house and I needed something, he would give it to me. But when it came to him standing up for a black life, it was more important for him to highlight the fact that KFC was closing early. And when I confronted him about it, and this goes back to something else you said, when I confronted him about it on social media, I told him, don't reply to me in private about this. I want you to say this with all these racist comments on your wall. And he refused to do it. He said, I don't want to engage you on my wall. But then he reached out in another separate private post and said, I hear you, Walter. But that's what's wrong to me with the distance between white people and black people on this issue. It's an immediate danger for us. To them, they don't want to risk being uncomfortable around their friends. It was too much for him to say, hey guys, yeah, actually, you shouldn't be saying, these guys protesting for their lives don't have jobs. He couldn't say that on his own wall, but he can reach out in private. And that goes back to what you said. The police that you've spoken to, they reach out on DM. They reach out in private conversations, right? But it's a bridge too far for them to say something publicly because it doesn't matter enough. They probably complain about other things. Oh, these guys did this on the street. KFC chicken was closed. They might post all type of things, but they can't post that this black man's life mattered. And this life was taken by somebody who took the same oath to protect life as I did.
Yeah.
You see where the difference is.
I do. Well said.
And that's one of the things that, for me is one of the biggest issues.
So from my perspective, the hard time I have is thinking about people that I know are good as racist.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And it's that's maybe I don't know if it's a discomfort thing. Maybe I give people too much credit. I don't know what
that's a real thing.
So I try not to look at it through that.
But you have to, Earl. You have to. You can't separate it. You can't say you're good on everything but caring about black people, but I still don't consider you a racist. You can't separate it. The first thing I told you about this guy that I'm speaking about was that he was a great guy, right? I led off the conversation by saying if I went to his house and I was homeless, he would probably invite me in with his wife and kids, right? But I told you that.
Yeah, but it wasn't important enough for him to say it. Yeah.
It wasn't important for him enough to say it in front of his friends.
Yeah. And that is something. And
oh yeah.
I think it's human nature to want to give people some credit, but when you break it down like that, it's right.
Give them credit, but just not when my life and my daughter's life is on the line.
And that's,
you feel me?
That's true. And I hope whoever's watching isn't thinking, man, why is this kid making this argument? I'm just trying to work through this.
And people are going to be saying that, but the people who are saying that, Earl, they are not listening to me.
Right.
They are hearing things that I'm saying that may upset them, but the empathy that you feel, right? They don't have that empathy because they don't care to know it.
And that's one thing that I do want to, we're going to skip on the police part for a second, because the empathy component and this is something that's a broader societal thing. And we talked about this when we were speaking about Trayvon, and
yes,
but even more so for you was Ahmaud Arbery.
Yes,
when he was killed.
Very difficult for me.
Because to me, that's not even, you can focus on police. That's focusing on a societal underpinning of some kind of underlying sickness that's not being addressed, because those weren't police officers that killed them. Those were white people, or just, they were people who saw, for some reason, that these people posed a threat just because they were black.
Oh yeah, and not really a threat, but
I don't. Yeah, or they used it as jogging. They used it as an excuse.
Yeah,
to engage in either harassment, which then went awry when they got their
blatant racism. It's not even harassment.
No, I'm not saying. Yeah. No, I'm not saying that. They chose to harass both of them,
a black person,
because they were black. That's racism.
Yes,
there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that.
Agreed.
But then when they lost control of it, I mean, George with
Ahmaud Arbery,
the guy who killed Trayvon
Zimmerman.
Yeah, George Zimmerman. Like, he got his ass kicked, and then he shot him.
Yeah,
the dudes in the truck with Ahmaud, they were getting their ass kicked.
Yeah,
and then they shot him.
Yeah,
like they tried to flex their superiority and their power over black men, and I think that there's something to that. There's a fear in certain pockets of black men. I don't know what causes it. I don't know if it's something that's ingrained or if it's something that's learned. Because, I mean, who knows? We're part of a country. Things are traditionally passed on. We don't even know that they're passed on. If you don't really do the work and try to understand yourself, you're never going to notice it until it comes up.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a fear in it. I felt it at times. I know, I mean, plenty of people still feel it. I don't feel it anymore. I've worked through it. I've known enough. But you see it all the time where, people will cross the street, or people won't drive through that neighborhood, or or they'll lock their door when they go through a neighborhood, or like these little things that if you don't notice them, you don't even think twice about them,
mm-hmm.
and try to understand why.
Yeah.
And what causes that? Like, what kind of thought have you put into that?
Well, I think what you're saying is right. There's a empathy component. There is a fear, right? Of, I think there's a little bit of fear of retribution for 400 years of oppression, of rape and murder and lynchings, hangings. Imagine, and it's hard. This is part of the maybe sympathetic aspect. I mean, empathy is a stretch, but I would have sympathy on you if like your parents or your grandparents had been, hung and tortured and sold and beat. But if I had done that to them, or somebody in my family had done that to them, there would be shame, right? So I would, maybe if I was a good person, I would feel bad. Like, I would feel sympathy for you, but I would also feel shame because that came from my background. Mm-hmm. I didn't do it. I didn't kill your family. I didn't hang your ancestors from trees, but somebody in my family did. And that's a really tough thing to deal with, right? For a lot of people. And I can understand why that would be a tough thing to deal with. The problem we're having is that people are refusing to deal with it. The shame is too much for them, right? It's this, and it's a lot of shame. It's a lot of bad things that were done to Black people in this country and continue to happen today. So I understand that it's a huge amount of shame, but character decides how you deal with that shame. Do you talk about it on a podcast when you know that people who don't feel the same way you do might look at you a different way? That's what you're doing, right? People are going to maybe look at you a little different and maybe say, oh, you should have said this argument or you should have said that argument. They're going to look at you different because you cared enough to address it. You care enough to address what's happening in society. But unfortunately, most people are too uncomfortable or too ashamed to address it. And so I think it goes back to one, sympathy, empathy, shame, right? But then there's another component of it too to me. It's not being comfortable, the unwillingness for people to be uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. When we talk, we have conversations that most people might consider to be uncomfortable at times, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think we've ever blown up at each other. I mean, I'm sure of it. We've never had any type of, thing, but we've disagreed on things. But some people, for instance, I went to Benedictine with you. There were a decent amount of Black people there, not a whole bunch, but a majority white school, right?
I actually think it was a pretty good diverse mix.
No, it was a diverse mix, but I would say,
it was still white. Majority white, yeah.
Yeah. And now that we've seen all of these things happen and all of this social unrest, how many white people from our school have addressed it publicly that you've seen?
The silence is deafening.
Okay. So let me tell you this then. When we were in school, and sorry, again, I'm bringing somebody's name into this, but Cheatwood, right? Mm-hmm. Again, Cheatwood, sorry. Our senior year, we won football, track, and basketball. But during the basketball season, something happened with Cheatwood and the police, remember?
Yep.
And we didn't know all the details, but we were outraged, right?
Yeah.
The white people were outraged, and everybody spoke up. How dare the police do this to Tim? They said he got into a physical altercation with the police. And maybe we heard that the police were harassing him intentionally because he had gotten a full scholarship to Ohio State. And maybe they, didn't like seeing that. But regardless of whatever it was, we all supported. I didn't hear one white person say, well, maybe Tim had a record or maybe Tim was resisting arrest. I never heard that. Did you hear that?
No.
Every white person at that school stood behind Tim unequivocally. They didn't need to know what the history was of whatever things he might have done in his past or anybody in his family would have done. They stood with him. But why did they stand with him? Is it because there was something on the line for them? There was a state champ. We were in the middle of the playoffs for basketball, state championship, right? And they felt this camaraderie. A lot of them had played football with him. They played basketball with him. They had this relationship where we were all benefiting off of each other. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that to cheapen what we had, because it's a real thing. I still feel it to this day. But let me get the thought across. Those same people who unequivocally stood with Tim and couldn't believe something like that could happen. No one was murdered. Nobody was hurt severely. Tim was hurt, but not severely with a life-threatening injury. But the outrage was palpable. Now, Tim has children now. I wonder why we aren't hearing more from those same white students who are afraid that maybe this thing could happen to one of their Black teammates, like Tim's children, or Tim himself, or me. The silence is deafening. The silence speaks volumes, though, at the same time, because I see my classmates that love me and I love them posting about their beautiful families, posting about a rough day at work, posting about other things that aggrieve them or other things that might have pissed them off during the week or the year. But they don't address the fact that a comrade that they had in school is at a higher risk of being murdered by a police officer, is at a higher risk of being having injustices served towards them. Their children are at a higher risk. if I knew, for instance, you know, with the twins, Tim and Jim Lorber, if I knew something, people were killing a higher percentage of people named Lorber, I would be out. Yeah, in South Africa, I would be outraged in America. Yeah. It wouldn't even have to be a local thing.
Right.
I would call and check on him. I think you would too. If you heard like a news story, like for some reason people are killing these Lorbers, I would check on it. I would be like, yo, are you okay? I would be so vocal. What can I do for you? Because I care about him. I care about his kids. We formed this real bond together. But when I see them, and I'm not saying that he has or that anybody else, when Stanley, like all these people that I genuinely have a love for, it makes me think. It makes me wonder, like, why aren't they standing up for me? Why don't they care enough? Are they that scared of being uncomfortable at work because a coworker might have seen a post that said Black Lives Matter? As if you don't agree with that?
Yeah.
It's the uncomfortableness. I don't want to go into work and have people look at me weird. My friends don't necessarily agree with that Black Lives Matter thing. I think I shouldn't maybe post it because it might be deemed socially, you know, unacceptable in my circles. I mean, that's what it comes down to. What we weigh Black life against, our uncomfortableness, our awkward feelingness when we're around people that we might like or don't agree with that term. Imagine having your life weighed against that, against me feeling uncomfortable, but your life is on the line or your child's life is on the line. But I'm a little more worried about how people perceive me at my job and how my friends perceive me when I'm off of Facebook. That's a very disheartening thing, especially when you feel like these are people that you've built the strongest bond with. I feel more camaraderie with my high school classmates than my collegiate classmates and football teammates. I mean, there's a genuine love. Does that mean that I love them any less? No, I honestly don't. That's not how my brain works. But it speaks volumes to me that they can't come out and just say. If it was the thing with Lorber's, I would say Lorber's life matters. If it was Irish people that were getting murdered today at a higher percentage than everybody else, I would say Irish people matter. Like, stop killing them. I would make a Facebook post about that and say, this is bullshit. How dare you go after these people? It would outrage me. No matter how many Black friends I might know that it made uncomfortable that I said, oh, you said the Lorbers, like, you know, or the Irish people, forget them. It wouldn't bother me. And if it did, it would bother me so little compared to my friend's life. You understand what I'm saying? And it's not that they're going to get killed. We said a higher percentage of Lorbers were getting killed. We don't know if he's going to get killed, but just the fact that it's a higher percentage bothers me. Why doesn't it bother you?
Yeah. I don't know.
It's that uncomfortable thing, man. It's strong, man. It's strong. Like, peer pressure is strong. It's so strong.
I think when you're listening to this, and I hope that, you know, some of the people that we're talking about, or that are,
and I'm not saying Jim or Tim. I'm talking in general.
I'm talking about in general. You know, the people that we do have ties to, or but honestly, the people who have ties to any Black person. If this is the train of thought that you have, ask yourself why. You know, why aren't you thinking about this through the perspective of Black parents? If you're a parent, why aren't you thinking this through the perspective, you know, they have kids. They're worried about the kids having to go through this, like you said earlier. In 20 years, you don't want your daughter going through this.
No, I don't.
You don't want her marching.
No, and I don't care how many Macy's windows get busted in the process.
Right.
Her life means more than that to me.
Macy's will be fine.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Actually, maybe Macy's won't. Target will be fine.
Target will.
Macy's is done. Yeah, but it's more like one of the things that moments like this afford us is the opportunity to look inward. So when we were speaking last time,
yes,
one of the first things, how are you doing? I know last time, things weren't going great at home, blah, blah, blah. And, I shared with you the fact that, things digressed, got divorced, and you were listening, and, we talked about introspection and what was learned through that. And there was a ton learned through a moment of extreme discomfort. Not just a moment, 2 years of extreme discomfort. And this is one of those moments for people. Sit with the discomfort. Figure out why you have questions, or why you're not doing anything, or that you're thinking about, okay, well, this just isn't a big deal. Because you know what? It doesn't matter if it's a big deal to me. It's a big deal to you. And I don't mean to sound cavalier about that. I'm not saying that even if that's what it takes, is just to kind of put yourself in that other person's shoes, and because you care about that person, that becomes a big deal.
Yeah, I agree.
But start to think about why you feel certain things around this. Why is your first inclination to look to stats? So one of the things that I've heard a lot of, and
what's that?
Is like, well, only X amount of people have been killed by police. And there's been more white people killed by police than black people.
More white people in America, but yeah.
Well, yeah, it's 70% to 12%.
Yeah.
It's the
big difference.
It's very disproportionate. And then you hear these other arguments. Well, crime is higher in black communities, so that's where police are.
Crime is always higher in impoverished communities,
but it's like
around the world.
It's like you're missing the point. These things are quick ways to disassociate yourself from an uncomfortable thought with yourself. Yes. Because if you could just point to that, then all of a sudden you don't have to think about it. You can walk away from it. It's pretty simple. But if you sit there and think with it, and one of the best things that I've had the opportunity to do through all this is I've been researching. I'm a history major. I love this stuff. Like, not that I love what's going on, but I like to research. I like to get behind it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I want people to hear, and this is something I actually heard, and I referred to this earlier. It was on a podcast. So there's this guy, Brett Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein's the bad guy. Brett Weinstein is.
Don't confuse those two.
Yeah, no, we don't want that. So
don't.
So he is a former professor at a college. He was dubbed a racist. He's not. I do not think he is. I think that he's very principled when it comes to how he approaches things. However, he's an evolutionary biologist, and the way that he explained this, and it was really kind of getting back to the origin story of blacks in America. And I thought that this is something, if we can hear this for what it is, this, even if you want to point to the fact that there's more crime in black communities, you can understand why. And if you were in that situation, you would be those same shoes. So he explained that, what slavery did. So imagine, the origin story, everyone's coming over on the boats. They purposely broke up families and communities so that there wasn't a set culture that could be passed on. So instead of everyone coming from one West African country or one community within that, they made sure that it was dispersed and it was integrated with blacks who were coming from other areas, so that the small tribes couldn't continue to foster that pride. So it ripped it apart. It took away their identity, and then it formed this new culture that was a lot safer for the slaveholders, because there wasn't unity. They weren't speaking the same language. Like all these, they didn't know each other. They didn't know who, like there was no identified leader of a community who could rally and cause issues for the slaveholders. It was very interesting. So that's the reality that was built up. So you have they almost did it to domesticate in a way. And then from there, you have this new community. And then all of a sudden slavery is gone. So you've built this system where you've, in a way, I'm not saying that it's weakened, but you've weakened bonds to that. Then you put in place a lot of different obstacles. So obviously there's Jim Crow down in the South, but even just the policing component to this. And this is one of the things that I found very interesting, because it's true. So why do you police underserved areas more? Yes, there's crime, but was it always that? But if you continue to police these areas, you can find reasons to arrest people. And what happens when you remove a man from a Black community? All of a sudden, the pool of men shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And what that's doing is that's putting more onus on Black women. However, Black women can't find a good man because there's far less of them, because they're being systematically incarcerated. And in doing so, that man has all these options. So why is he going to settle down with one woman? They're playing human nature in a way. And what that does is that creates a system of single family or single parent, typically mothers who can't work or because they have to take care of the child, or they can only get there. It creates a system that is really, really flawed. And in that created what we're currently sitting in, which is these pockets of severely underserved communities where a lot of the crime happens because, for one, there's no jobs. And when there's no jobs for these kids, what are they going to do? They're going to try to figure out how to have a purpose. How do I get money? How do I get stuff? Like, that's what we're all doing. We have jobs so we can get money, get stuff, buy a house, do this. They can't do it the regular way. So they turn to crime because that's an outlet. They don't see that there's necessarily another way to go about it. And he explained this in a really amazing way to just kind of see the timeline of how that played out. And that's kind of where we're sitting now. So when it comes to Black Lives Matter, there's the police component, which we talked about. But to me, there's that component that gets down to the racism that we aren't necessarily, we're starting to address. It's being heard. Does that resonate with you, what I just said? Or is that too academic of an approach? Because to me, I look at that and I'm like, that's really fucked up. And that needs to be undone.
I think that I've never heard this person speak. I will definitely, I promise I'll go check them out after we get finished with this. A lot of it I did agree with. There were some things that were sort of like, I don't know if it was too academic or just a little too simplified. Like I didn't do it justice. Oh yeah, I'm sure. Like, but just as the part where, there's more women, so you can be a player more. Like, that's a little simplified for my thoughts on the situation. I think there is a lot more that goes into fatherless homes. But the overarching theme of what you said, it seems about right. I would love to hear more about what he's saying. I think that's correct. I think incarceration in Black communities, I think that defunding of our education system in Black communities plays a huge role in single family homes. I think that's one of the the biggest things, just as big as incarceration, is if we can't learn, if they're constantly taking money out of our school system, then how can we grow? Everything that you grow from is something that you've learned, right? And if you take our ability away to learn, you're taking our ability away to grow and to become, the best of us that we can be. A lot of us have made it out of that situation strong, but you have to be much stronger than in normal circumstances. And in a white community, I mean, we all know this living in Ohio, whose school system is better, Solon's or Cleveland's? We can go down the line. White community or black community, who has the funding, who doesn't, right? So yeah, it's harder. It makes it harder for a lot of reasons. And that leads to a lot of things that people talk about in the black community. But like I said, just as much as incarceration, I would say the way they defund our education. I mean, we have a segregated education system in America. Regardless of whatever laws say, it's definitely a segregated system.
So I'm curious. So since we're talking about education, and I know this is definitely a variant of where we were going, but you know, this is something that's coming up more and more. So there's proposals, and this has been out there for a while, for school choice.
Okay, talk to me about that. Is this in Ohio, or is this?
Oh, this is so. Ohio's had school choice. Like it's these are things that have been shown to work. Where you know what, you are in an underserved community, you get to select where you want to go to school, and some of those tax dollars get directed there. But I feel like that's something that's pretty massive, is to decentralize schools from being within these arbitrary confines of whatever, East Cleveland. Okay, you have to go to, is it Shaw?
Yeah, Shaw.
Right. Yeah, like, okay, well, if I lived just a couple streets over, I could, I don't know, go somewhere else, or could have gone to, like if you're in Collinwood, a few streets over, you could have gone to Euclid. Or, you know, it's like, these are very arbitrary things, but the difference in education could be stark.
Oh, yes. And it's purposeful.
It is purposeful. I mean, it goes back, that goes back to a whole different discussion around redlining and very deliberate means of keeping certain pockets of neighborhoods confined, so that the rest could be comfortable. I guess
100% agree.
I guess is the way to look at it.
Comfortability.
But that's a filler word. These conversations are starting to take place, but I don't think they're necessarily taking place in the right areas. So, like, I've been under this contention that this is the perfect year for like a third party candidate to come out of somewhere who is, you know, centrist, who would appeal to the right and the left, because we have two old kind of pathetic white guys who are one of the two of them is going to be president again. And do we see that moving the ball forward? What's a way that like the black community can rally in a different way around something else besides this establishment that, quite honestly, I don't think that it's served the black community well at all?
And you're talking about the Democratic establishment, or what are you?
I'm thinking
small,
about
lowercase d Democratic.
Yeah, I think so, because like we had that conversation around your was it your silent ally is worse than your outspoken enemy or something like that. And to me, that's how I look at it.
It was a Martin Luther King. I'll read that too later on. Yeah.
Okay, but I really feel like they're a huge component of the problem. Like they're not. I mean, you had the first black president, and nothing really got done around this. Like that's frustrating.
And why do you think?
Why do I think? I think I think there's a certain level. This is just me being.
Yeah, we're spitballing here.
I think that this is more so that there is more power when certain parts of the population are repressed and are reliant upon government. That's where some people get their power from. So if this is just my mindset. So if you are offered this, and this, and you are dependent upon the government for this, and you are seen as the party that provides this, you're the good guy. Whereas this party's asking, well, go out and do it. Neither of them is giving you a great outlet, but this one's at least providing for the underserved component of the economic need. Like, is it seen that way? Or is it from a matter of, okay, this is a white dude thinking this way?
Well, so I'm going to preface this by saying this is my opinion, like you did. Yeah. This is just my opinion. This is not a community opinion or anything like that. My opinion on this is, when you say, I'm sure you hear the loud booms in the background. I think somebody's setting off fireworks. But to me, the frustrating thing when I hear stuff like this is when I hear the argument of, well, the Democrats really aren't doing anything for you. So, why hang on? Why vote for them? The frustrating thing to me is that it usually comes up after a Black person has been killed, and there's an election going on, and they're saying, well, they promise you this, and they don't get it done. Well, we know with Obama, Mitch McConnell came out and said he would be the Grim Reaper and kill his legislation. That's just a fact. Like, he said that on camera, so we can't dispute that.
I'm not disputing.
We know Congress has to pass things into law, legislative branch, right? Executive branch is completely different. So there are a lot of things that I felt like he should have gotten done, but I know that there was somebody there whose sole agenda, according to his words, were to block him at every turn. So yeah, a lot of things didn't get done, unfortunately. But the person blocking a lot of those progressive legislative measures was a Republican. Right. So you have.
I'm not making the argument for Republicans.
Oh yeah, no, I'm not saying you. I'm saying when I hear this, Democrats aren't doing anything. Republicans are the party of Abe Lincoln. Like, those things. I mean, I almost die laughing sometimes when I hear these things. Like, it's like, yeah, Republicans were the party of Abe Lincoln. So like, if there was a dog that bit me on the left side of the street, and then one day I'm walking down, so I always walk on the right side of the street, so stay away from the dog. But then one day the dog goes over to the other side of the street. It's like me saying, oh, I'm going to stay on this side of the street because it used to bite me on that side of the street, even though the dog is now on the same side of the street I'm walking down. Like, no, I'm going on the other side of the street. Like, that party of Lincoln thing, I mean, it just drives me crazy. But then you look at more modern stuff, like Mitch McConnell blocking a lot of these progressive measures. Like, I remember when they were fighting to not make MLK Day a holiday. Like, these super basic things like that Republicans do that are just smacks in the face to Black people. It's not even, if you would argue and say Democrats don't get things done, Republicans are actively fighting to disenfranchise us, actively fighting to keep a knee on our neck, actively fighting to not reform policing when we know there's systematic racism in the system. So if I have to walk down a street with two sides on it, I'm going to walk on the side where the dog is not, because I don't want to get bit, right? I don't want my daughter to get bit. So is there a better option? Oh, yes, I think there's a better option. Is this election, to me, the time to be like, oh, let's go find a third party to vote for, and with the possibility of Trump still getting elected? Oh, no. I want Trump out of office.
Yeah.
And I don't care if the person is not the perfect picture of what I see as a progressive candidate for my people. I want the person in office that's not going to bite my people on the ass when I walk down the street. And that's what I get when I vote Democrat. And for anybody else who's, even Black people who might say, oh, blindly supporting the Democrats, I would ask those people, what are you doing in the primaries, locally and nationally, to support somebody with your ideology, right? Don't just wait till the candidates are picked and then everybody was like, oh, well, you're just going to vote with them because you're going. What did you do? There were a ton of candidates this time. I mean, some very, I liked Elizabeth Warren. I like Cory Booker. I liked a few people, to be honest with you. A lot of people said a lot of good things. I did research on them, and I contributed to the ones that I felt were the best. I campaigned, made phone calls for the ones that I felt could help further my agenda. I do that. I try to do that locally. But a lot of the people who say that, they take no steps whatsoever to change the system. It's just a talking point. It's something to throw out there. But what are the Democrats doing for you? Or when Black people say it to me about supporting Democrats, oh, but they're not doing nothing for you. The system is rigged. What are you doing to unrig it? Or are you just repeating a talking point that right-wing media has floated into your Black Facebook feed, and now you are biting into it? And a lot of them have legitimate points, because there's a lot that should have been done under Democrats. A lot of them have not been progressive enough for Black rights. But like I said, what are you doing to change it? I try to take steps to change it. I feel like things are way more progressive now than they used to be because of people trying to make a change. But when you're on Facebook complaining about, oh, Democrats don't do anything, Republicans don't do anything, I'm just not gonna vote. That is the laziest excuse that you could possibly give, right? It's the most ignorant excuse that you could possibly give. Show me what you've done to change that. You know, we're as Black people standing on the shoulders of greats, people who died, sacrificed their lives, were beat for us, marched in the street, and were bitten by dogs. Do we not have a responsibility to continue to fight and to change things, right? Or do we just give up and say, oh, the system is broken, forget it? So that's my opinion on it. And you can find 10 people with different opinions, but don't be all talk with me. I'm about facts, and I'm about doing things that you want to get done to make it happen. If you're not about that, then you can sit back and not walk down the street, because that's somebody's option. Hey,
yeah, sure.
Dog on the right, no dog on the left. I just don't want to walk down the street. I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to participate. But the reason why it's hard for me not to do that, and I've come so close sometimes to be like, they're right, man. Nothing gets done. But the reason I can't bring myself not to vote and not to participate and not to try to make it a better democracy is because I'm scared that my action of not voting is going to get somebody like Trump elected. And then we're going to have a higher number of Black people getting killed by racist whites and by racist police officer, and a much more inequality in the system. I don't want that blood on my hands, right? I don't want it on my hands. I would rather do my part, no matter how small it is, no matter how imperfect it is, but I'm doing something. Some people are just so lazy and shiftless that they don't want to do anything but complain about it, right? I don't want anybody's blood on my hands. So I will take the side of the street that the dog is not on at the moment. You know what I'm saying? Regardless of how they didn't get this done or they didn't get this done. And I'll address that when primaries come around. I'll address that in who I support and who I give my money to. That's how I will try to make a change in that system.
How do you get more involvement there? Because I feel like sure, this was kind of decided before. I mean, this upswell is nothing new. This has been happening for years.
Yeah.
But why do you think that there's such disengagement amongst the community around that?
Against which community?
Black community. Because
the Black community,
especially when it comes to primaries, like there's like this, the numbers don't, like primary numbers suck anyway.
Yeah, hopelessness. That's what it is. You feel like I've been doing this for so long. Can I really change it? They talk about the definition of insanity, doing something over and over again with the same results. It's a logical conclusion. I'm not saying that these people are illogical. I'm just saying they're lazy. And that's a big difference.
Yeah. But I wonder if there's something to that. Like, if nothing changes, then that almost promotes a lethargic or complacent voter base.
Yeah, but things do change. Things change slowly.
They do, and it starts local, typically, and then enough localities do it, and then it spreads to different states, and then once there's enough states, then it's federal.
Yeah, it can go from bottom up, and in this case, nationwide with these protests.
This is an example of that. Yeah, definitely, no question. I was just curious about some of that,
and those are just my thoughts. You'll get somebody else who will tell you something completely different.
And the thing is, like, I have no idea what that lens looks like. I'm sitting up here in New Hampshire. I was raised, my dad was, I remember the first time I heard Rush Limbaugh was probably 12. Which is funny because my dad's a Turk and boy, he just latched on to Rush. But I've always considered myself from fiscally, I'm conservative. I think you should be accountable. No one's conservative right now fiscally, so it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
it's social.
Oh no, definitely not the Republicans.
But
if that's the reason to hold on to the Republican Party, then I think that's been out the window for at least 4 years.
Yeah, but I feel like socially, a lot more people are like me, where they're very middle of the road or maybe slightly left.
But what does middle of the road mean to you socially? I don't understand what middle of the road socially is.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I've never had to actually define it. So I'm not right. I'll tell you that much.
What does right mean to you, though?
So right to me is basically, in many ways, when it comes to social issues, a bit of it's like that immovable force. This is the way things are. It shouldn't change because this is what we're comfortable with. Mm-hmm. This is what we can control. This works for us, type of thing. And I don't care that it's not working for someone else or a big body of people. This is the way it is. Mm-hmm. And to me, I don't like that. Okay. If there's, as people, we should always be trying to grow.
Agreed.
And that part doesn't fit with me.
Mm-hmm.
However, I'm not going to just throw it all willy-nilly at the same time.
What do you mean willy-nilly?
So there's going to be a component where there's a new thing that's going on. There might be something like, okay, we need to do this, and this immediately.
Uh-huh.
Okay, well, what's the counterpoint to that? I'm just someone who likes balance to it, and I want to dissect things. I want to think things through, and I'll move. I'm just not gonna.
Once it's explained to you,
I'm not gonna move all the way over here just to do it without thinking of the consequences, and I'm not gonna be over here just because I don't want to move. I'm more in this place, which slowly but surely kind of moves further and further towards. I'm trying to look at which way am I going on the screen. This is left for me anyway. But then
I get that.
But then I also try to think of, all right, well, what are the things that I can actually control? I can control my small circle. All right, I'm going to be the role model. I don't care how great of a guy Barack Obama is. I do care how horrible of a dick Trump is. But for the most part, I'm not looking to them to be role models. So I don't necessarily think of it in that context. It's who could put me in the best financial situation so I can put my kids through college and that and the other thing. So that's where I'm torn at times. So I don't like regulation. However, I don't like some of the social things over here. Uh-huh. It's a really hard trade-off because there's no third option. There's no fourth option. Like we live in a very polarized society. We got two.
A question then, right? So you said it's a hard trade-off, right? You don't agree with the right, some of their hard views that are detrimental to, minorities. But then on, the other side of it, you don't want to go too far, too willy-nilly, you said, with, whatever crazy ideas that they have. I mean, I hear what you're saying. So my question is this. You need to be convinced, you need to see the different sides of the options. And I think that's a fundamental difference between white America and Black America. We're looking not to be murdered.
And I acknowledge that. 100%. I get that.
We're looking not to be stopped by the police and our rights taken away from us and being incarcerated. Financials come a little bit later on in our thought process when we're talking about voting, because your biggest concern is who can put the most money in your pocket. My biggest concern is who's not going to get my daughter killed. Mm-hmm. And as dramatic as that sounds, that is the reality that we live in, because I always tell my employees, right, you know, I own a studio and we'll talk about that someday. But I tell my employees, sometimes I go up to the studio and nobody knows I'm coming, and there'll be a client waiting in the hallway because one of my employees is late. And I tell them, I don't come up to the studio that much. So if I came up here and this client is waiting in the hallway, there were 100 other times that this happened. So just, we're seeing these examples of these Black people getting killed. There's thousands of other times that these things are happening, right? You know, we know that. That's just the reality of the situation.
Right.
And so that's the choice. Like, it's like, you look at what's financially beneficial to you, but then there has to come a point in time, right, where you have to move beyond that. And let me take this opportunity.
And just so you know, this is one of them. Like,
no, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. But let me read. I want to read that quote, because this is it ties into that quote. So this is a quote from MLK, April 16th, 1963. He was in a jail cell. This was, you know, during his last years of life before he was assassinated. So this is what Martin Luther King said. He said, "First, I must confess that over the last few years, I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's great stumbling block in the stride towards freedom is not the Ku Klux Klan, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is in the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is in the presence of justice, who consistently says, I agree with you in the goal that you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically feels he can set a timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who consistently advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient time. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection." And in that quote, it really sums up even what we're talking about now, right? It becomes the point when white people have to stop thinking about themselves. And when the time is right for them, it has to be about, you're with us and you're ready to move with us for our rights, for our life. It's really not about your finances anymore. It's not about, you know, trying to convince enough people, waiting for the right time to make the right move in the right moment. For Black people, the right moment is always now. It has to be now for us, because it might be our last moments here. We want to make sure that we are pushing always as hard as we can. But I agree with MLK on this. It's the most frustrating thing for me. Like, you know, I mentioned some students from Benedictine. Like, I just said their names. They might have a big Black Lives Matter poster on their Facebook page. I don't know. So let me not say, you know, I'm not saying that they haven't posted anything, but the vast majority, what I see is people giving excuses why we should wait, why we shouldn't protest, why the protest should stop because some windows got broken. We should wait till there's a bigger movement. Well, we should get more people involved in the movement. But that's so frustrating to me. It's more frustrating than the blatant racist who's saying, F you, nigger, because to me, you should be on my side, because you say that you hear me, but you are unwilling to move with me now, not later when you get it, not later when you understand better, not later when somebody explains it to you a little bit better. But trust me, try to sympathize and empathize with me and move now, especially when it's a matter of life or death, especially when it's a matter of basic human rights. Don't wait. Don't worry about these other, Republicans feel like, fiscally, this should be the option and this will be. No, we don't care. Nobody should care about that when it comes to a human life. You feel what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And those are the things that are frustrating, because when you know good people and you know good white people and white people that will give you the shirt off of their back if you needed it, it frustrates you when you see their inaction when it makes them uncomfortable. Or when they use the excuse of, I'm fiscally responsible, that's why I can I can bear to vote Republican, even though, you know, they do some things that are injustice wise to the Black community that are unfair. Like, you know, that's not an excuse to me. I don't care what they do financially to you. I don't care what their policies are, if it's being weighed against the life of my people. And, you know, that quote, I hadn't read that quote before. That quote just touched me in a lot of different ways. I really understood what he was doing sitting there in that jail cell, like how frustrated he must have been. Like,
yeah, you could tell.
These white people tell me on their DMs or in private how much they care about me, but they won't move with me. They won't move now with me. They need a few more people to come along. They need a few more reasons why to move. They need a few more Black people to get their necks kneeled on and murdered before they can move with us now. That's what's frustrating to me more than any Klan member or, you know, some racist cop. I mean, if we had the full strength of good white people behind us, this would not be an issue.
That'd be done.
It would be done. There are much, like you said, much more good white people than the percentage of racists. That's my opinion. And I believe that wholeheartedly. But your unwillingness to react and to act with us, to take action, to bear arms with us, to march with us, to fight with us, until it's a time when you approve, a time when you feel is the correct time, a moment when you feel is the correct moment or the precipice. Like, the precipice has passed. We are falling off the cliff. And you stopped marching with us before we fell. You see? Like, that's the disappointing part for me, is there. I see the good. I see the good. I see the good in police officers. But no, you're not a good police officer if you can stand with somebody, one of your colleagues, who murdered and took somebody's life, an innocent person's life. I do not respect you if you cannot stand up for that. I don't care how uncomfortable it makes you at work or with your friends or when you're on social media and people reply like, oh, you don't stand with blue lives. I don't care about that, because your moral conscience should speak volumes that a life was taken. And forget how uncomfortable you are the next day you're at work. Imagine you're uncomfortable at work, right? You're uncomfortable at work because you seem to support Black lives. How do you feel Black people going to work being a Black life?
Right.
Think about that. You're scared to post it. We have to live it. I mean, the extremes are, to me, sometimes baffling. And it's why I said sometimes Black Lives Matter is so simple to me. But it seems so complicated. Like, we can have this long conversation about like, oh, what's right, what's wrong? No, right is right. You know, right is right, period. Right makes you uncomfortable. Be uncomfortable. Be uncomfortable with me.
Yeah, that's good, man. Like, we need to be uncomfortable. And I actually I wanted to read one more quote.
Please do.
And I read this with you last time. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. And this, to me, this gets to the heart of it, because when it's all said and done, and you know, when you think about the kind message, the simple message of all the peaceful protests, it's like, we're all in this together. You know, we're all humans. Let's focus on that. And if we can all look at each other as humans, then this isn't a big deal. However, there is still that quotient that doesn't see Black lives as the same as human lives. And that's, to me, that sounds dramatic, because it's like, oh, no. That's
sounds real.
well, I mean, so to you, it sounds real. To me, it's like you have this part of set, like a vast majority of like, what are you talking about? I'm not racist. I don't care. Like, but if you look at it through a different lens, and this was where this quote came in that I thought was really freaking powerful. The one from Tom Herman, the coach of Texas.
Yes. Oh, that was really good. Yeah.
To me, this kind of sums it up, because it puts it in a little bit of a different lens. It takes it away from the police violence. It takes it away from stats. It takes away from all this stuff. And it's like, I'm going to look you in the eye. I'm going to ask you if you feel like this. And if you feel like this is what we're leaving you with today. Think about why you feel this way and what can you do to get past this. So here's the quote. And so for those who don't know, Tom Herman is the head football coach at the University of Texas. So it's, can the average fan relate? No, they can't, Tom Herman said. There's a double standard, maybe a little bit. We're going to pack 100,000 people into the stadium, and millions are going to watch on TV that are predominantly white. Not all of them, certainly, but most of them are white. We're going to cheer them on. So he's talking about black men now. We're going to cheer them on when they score touchdowns, and we're going to hug our buddies when they get a sack or an interception. But are we going to let them date our daughter? Are we going to hire them to a position of power in our company? That's the question I have for America. You can't have it both ways. And if you're going to cheer for them and love them for 3.5 hours on a Saturday in the fall, you better have the same feeling for them off the field, because they're human beings. They deserve the same amount of respect and human rights that all of us in this country have when we agreed to that social contract to be a member of the United States. And that's all you're asking for.
That's an amazing quote.
The same respect that we would give ourselves or we would want for ourselves, let's want it for everybody. And if there's something inside of you that felt uncomfortable in hearing that, especially that middle part about, are you going to let them date our daughters?
Daughter.
You know, are you going to hire them to a position of power? Like, if that made you uneasy, think about that for a moment. Think about why. Because I know that this conversation isn't necessarily to change, but to make a point. But to me, it is to change, because I think people can change. I give people credit, and I think that they will if they start to think and internalize this stuff more, and just have empathy. I have a son. I have a daughter. You have a daughter. You want a good future for your daughter. That's all I want for my kids.
Yes.
You know, I want to be successful. I want to be able to provide. That's all you want to be able to do for your family. Like, there's no fucking difference in this. So on that note, I want everyone, after you've watched this, if you've made it through the whole thing, to think about that. And are you being vocal? Be supportive. You know, if someone lost their parent, you leave a note of condolence. If someone got in an accident, you would write, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that." You know, if one of your friends writes a post and they are troubled about what's going on with this, and you decide that, you know what, I don't want to rock the boat, but, you know, I do feel for Walter, but I just can't bring myself to do it. Ask yourself, why the hell not? And try to just be a better person, because this isn't hard. This isn't fucking hard at all. So a lot of the questions I asked throughout this, I mean, we went through this conversation before.
Yes.
I mean, I wanted to ask them because there are things that come up.
Yes.
And there are things that people are thinking.
And thank you for being brave enough to do that.
You're welcome. But I mean, these are conversations that need to be had. Yeah, they take time. Yeah, they take energy. But you know what? If we want to be a better people, it's not going to be, I mean, it should be easy, but unfortunately you have to convince people, and you have to have these conversations, and you got to move the needle. So think about ways that we could do that. Educate yourselves, and, you know, stay curious about each other, about what you don't know, and, you know, get out there and do it. So thank you very much, Walter, for taking the time.
You're welcome.
To getting this up so people can do that, and just keep up the fight for life, man. And things are happening. Things are happening. So
thank you.
Yeah, keep that ball and run with it. Hey, you do that well.
I do that well. Used to.
That's true. Pretty damn well too. So
thank you.
All right. Thanks, bud.
You're welcome.